I was just a retired soldier, trying to live a quiet life, delivering food. I thought I'd finally escaped the blood and gore, ready for a laid-back, anonymous existence. Who knew that 5 years later, on an ordinary afternoon, the Ice Queen CEO of Harmony Creek, Victoria Chun, would pull up in a luxury car, a little boy who looked exactly like me in tow, and block my path. She slammed a DNA report and a humiliating bodyguard contract in my hands. That's when it hit me. That one wild night had somehow made me a dad. She thought she could buy me, control me. What she didn't know was that her and Alex's arrival was about to awaken a lion I'd spent 5 years trying to put asleep. My name is Jack Miller, a completely unremarkable food delivery driver. If you absolutely had to point out something unusual about me, it would be my speed. I could always beat the app's estimated delivery time by a third, rain or shine, all year round. An absolute beast in the industry, you could say. Today was no different. I was weaving through the back streets of Harmony Creek on my beat-up old scooter, where the only thing that didn't rattle was the bell. It was 3 in the afternoon, well past the lunch rush, so traffic was smooth. I was humming a tune, calculating that after this last delivery, I could clock out early and grab a hot diner burger at Old Man Johnson's by the bridge. However, a flashy Maserati Quattroporte, parked at an incredibly arrogant angle, completely blocked the narrow alley in front of me. This alley was a shortcut through the old part of town, so tight that not even a bicycle could get through, let alone my scooter. I squeezed the brake, a frown pulling in my brow. The car windows were tinted dark, so I couldn't see inside. I waited patiently for 2 minutes, but there was no movement from the car. Behind me, a few other delivery guys started honking impatiently. Hey, you gonna move or what? Driving a fancy car doesn't make you special. Show some common courtesy. I sighed, killed the engine, and pushed my scooter forward, then raised a hand to tap on the smooth, mirror-like window. Excuse me, could you please move your car? No response. I tapped again, a little harder this time. Finally, the dark window silently slid down. A face as cold as an ice sculpture appeared before me. The woman was beautiful, but it was an aggressively sharp kind of beauty. Her eyes were piercing, her nose bridge high, her lips thin and pale. She wore gold-rimmed glasses, and the gaze behind them was like she was looking at an inanimate object. A perfectly tailored black suit gave her an aura that screamed, "Stay away." I froze for a moment, not because of her looks, but because that face. It felt strangely familiar. A dusty corner of my mind was suddenly prodded, like a key turning a lock. Fragmented, hazy memories, reeking of alcohol, flashed through my head. 5 years ago, a celebration for one of my buddies. I'd blacked out. Her gaze lingered on my faded blue delivery uniform for a split second, a flicker of disdain in her eyes. "Jack Miller," she said, her voice as devoid of warmth as her expression. My gut clenched. She knew my name. "That's me. And you are?" I asked, trying to sound composed. She didn't answer. Instead, she shifted slightly. That's when I noticed a child in the car's seat beside her. A boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, dressed in a sharp little suit. His skin was pale, his lips pressed tightly together, and he was staring at me with wide, dark eyes, unblinking. My breath hitched. That little face was practically a mirror image of mine. The same eyebrows, the same eyes, even that stubborn tilt to his chin was identical. My mind went blank. "Victoria Chun," the woman finally said, stating her name. Victoria Chen, a name known by everyone in Harmony Creek's business world. The head of Chen Industries, known for her iron grip and ruthless nature. I often saw her on the covers of business magazines while delivering food. We were supposed to be 2 parallel lines, never meant to intersect. 5 years ago, the Grand Paramount Hotel, room 8808, Victoria said succinctly, as if reciting a report that had nothing to do with her. "You don't remember?" My palms started to sweat. The Grand Paramount. After that night, I woke up the next morning alone, with only an envelope containing $10,000 and a note. I'd never been so insulted in my life. I tossed the money out the window right then and there. For me, it was an accident I needed to forget as quickly as possible. Turns out, this accident had borne fruit 5 years later, and it was coming to my doorstep. Victoria seemed satisfied with my reaction. She picked up a file from the passenger seat and handed it to me. "This is a DNA test report. You can take it to any facility for re-verification. Once confirmed, sign this contract. I numbly took the file, my fingers stiff. I didn't open it. There was no need. That kid's face was all the evidence I needed. I pulled out the contract, and my eyes landed on the title: Personal Bodyguard and Childcare Agreement. The content was overbearing and humiliating. Party A, Victoria Chun. Party B, Jack Miller. Party B was required to provide 24/7 personal protection for Party A's son, Alex Miller, and also serve as his personal assistant. The contract term was 1 year, with a monthly salary of $10,000. But the agreement never once mentioned the word father, only defining me as a high-end nanny and bodyguard. The most glaring clause was, Party B shall not disclose the blood relationship between the two parties to Alex Miller in any situation or by any means. My temper flared. I'm not signing this. I shoved the contract and the file back into the car, my voice turning cold. Ms. Chun, 5 years ago was an accident, and I apologize. But a child isn't merchandise, and I'm not a tool you can buy with money. If you need a bodyguard, the streets are full of them. I'm out. With that, I pushed my scooter, intending to squeeze past on the sidewalk. Stop. Victoria's voice was still icy, but now it held an undeniable command. I ignored her. What do you think a food delivery driver like you can offer my son? Her words cut like knives. Will he live rough with you, crammed into a tiny studio apartment, or will he stay with me, attend Harmony Creek's best schools, receive the most elite education, and inherit a multi-billion-dollar fortune in the future? I stopped, my back to her, my fist clenching audibly. No, I can't give him those things. I took a deep breath, then turned around to face her. But I also won't let him live in a world without a father, only bodyguards and agreements. Just then, the silent little boy spoke. His voice was young, but his words were remarkably clear, carrying a calm that didn't belong to his age. Dad, that one word was like a bullet striking my heart. I froze. Victoria's expression shifted for the first time. A crack appeared in her Ice Queen facade as she looked down at her son, her eyes filled with a complex emotion. The little boy didn't look at her. He unbuckled his seatbelt, pushed open the car door, and with short legs, walked to me, looking up stubbornly. Dad, he said again. I crouched down to his level. My heart pounded, and a bittersweet, tender feeling I'd never known before swelled in my chest. What's your name? My voice was dry. Alex Miller, he replied. Yeah, my last name. Victoria Chun was truly a contradictory woman. Didn't your mom tell you not to call strangers Dad? I tried to soften my tone. He shook his head, then pulled a tablet from his small backpack. His tiny fingers flew across the screen for a few seconds before he held it up to me. On the screen was my personal information. Everything, in minute detail, from when I retired 3 years ago and came back to Harmony Creek, registering as a delivery driver. It included my daily routes, average delivery times, and even which public restroom I always stopped at for a smoke. I've investigated you, Alex said, his tone like a tiny adult. You're not a bad person, and you look just like me. Victoria had clearly never expected her reserved son, who rarely spoke to anyone, to not only speak up but also conduct his own investigation, with his first earth-shattering word being Dad. She'd always thought she could control everything. I looked at the little guy, my anger replaced by a mix of amusement and exasperation. This kid was a genius. So, you're my son, right? I asked him. He nodded emphatically. I reached out and ruffled his soft hair. Get in the car, I said, standing up and turning to Victoria. I'll sign a contract, but the terms need to be changed. I'm not a bodyguard. I'm his dad. Victoria looked at us, father and son, her eyes shimmering behind her gold-rimmed glasses. After a long moment, she nodded. Fine. And just like that, on an ordinary afternoon, my life trajectory was completely changed by a Maserati and a son who dropped out of nowhere. The honking in the alley had become a cacophony. I ignored the impatient drivers and told Victoria, you go ahead. I'll finish my deliveries and then I'll contact you. Victoria glanced at me, seemingly surprised by my calm planning for the next steps, but she didn't ask any further questions. She simply handed me a business card. This is my assistant's number. Call her when you arrive. Got it. The Maserati let out a low growl and slowly backed out of the alley. Alex poked his head out the back window, watching me until the car disappeared around the corner. I straddled my scooter, took a deep breath, and started the engine again. My heart, which had been so congested moments before, now held a strange sense of calm. I was a dad. The realization felt absurd, yet a heavy sense of responsibility settled over me. After my last delivery, I didn't go for the diner burger. Instead, I headed back to my home, a small, $800 a month studio in a rundown part of town. 15 square feet, a bed, a table, and a wardrobe. That was it. I sat on the edge of the bed and lit a cigarette. Through the haze of smoke, I pulled out my phone and dialed an encrypted number. "Hey, Stinger. Boss." A surprised voice came from the other end. "You finally decided to call? I thought you were really going to spend your whole life delivering food in Harmony Creek. I need you to look into someone. Victoria Chun of Chun Industries, and her son, Alex Miller." I kept it brief. "Victoria Chun? The Ice Queen of Harmony Creek? Boss, you and her." Stinger's voice was full of gossip. "Cut the crap. Just investigate. I need to know all the threats around her, potential and existing. Also, check the guest log for the Grand Paramount Hotel 5 years ago, specifically room 8808 that night. I need to know why she was there." "Got it. Mission accomplished." I hung up and crushed the cigarette in the ashtray. Victoria showing up with a child wasn't just about needing a bodyguard. A woman like her didn't do anything without a purpose. The controlling nature of her contract and the unknown threats facing her son meant I had to figure out what was going on. I wasn't alone anymore. An hour later, I arrived at the Bluffs at Stonehaven, Harmony Creek's most exclusive gated community, carrying my worn canvas bag with a few changes of clothes. The guard at the gate took one look at my delivery uniform and immediately stopped me, his eyes full of disdain. "What do you want? This is a private residence. No outside deliveries allowed." I didn't waste words. I dialed the number on the business card. Soon, a sharp-looking woman in a business suit came jogging out, respectfully ushering me inside. The guard's jaw nearly hit the ground. The villa was huge, decorated in a minimalist, cold aesthetic, feeling empty and lifeless, much like its owner. Victoria was sitting on the living room sofa, a laptop on her lap, seemingly engrossed in work. Alex sat beside her, tablet in hand, tinkering with something. Victoria looked up as I entered. "Mrs. Davison, take him to the guest room," she instructed a woman in her 50s, her tone flat, as if arranging an object. Mrs. Davison, who I assumed was the housekeeper, sized me up, her disdain undisguised. "Sir, please follow me." She emphasized "sir" with a sarcastic bite. I ignored her, walked straight to Victoria, and set my canvas bag on the expensive coffee table. "The contract? Is it revised?" Victoria's brow furrowed almost imperceptibly, clearly annoyed by my dirty bag on her table. "My assistant will give it to you." "No." I shook my head. "I want to see it now in front of you. And there are some clauses we need to discuss further." Victoria finally closed her laptop and looked directly at me. "What do you want to discuss?" "First, I am Alex Miller's father, not a bodyguard. So, protecting him is my responsibility, not my job. All mentions of bodyguard in the contract need to be removed. Second, the $10,000 monthly salary, I don't want it. I'll support my son. I don't need your money. But I'll live here and eat here, considering it the environment you provide for his upbringing, which I accept. Third, and most importantly, I stated, word for word, the clause "no disclosure of blood relationship" must be removed. I won't proactively tell him, but when he needs to know, I must have the right to tell him the truth. My words made the air in the living room solidify. Mrs. Davison looked at me like I was insane. She'd probably never seen anyone dare to speak to Victoria Chun like this. Victoria's ice-cold face finally showed a clear flicker of emotion. Anger. "Jack Miller, have you mistaken your place?" Her voice was cold enough to chip ice. "What right do you have to bargain with me?" "The right of being his dad." I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. "Victoria, I know you look down on me. You think I'm poor, useless, unable to give him a good life. You're right. I can't give him a multi-billion-dollar fortune, but I can give him what a father should give. For example, when someone bullies him, I can step up immediately instead of waiting for a bodyguard to report to you, for you to handle it later." Victoria was speechless, choked by my words. Just then, Alex, who had been silent, put down his tablet. He walked to my side, tugged my shirt, then looked up at Victoria and said in his calm, childish voice, "Mom, I agree." Victoria's expression instantly became incredibly complex. She looked at her son, then at me, her eyes showing shock, reluctance, and a hint of powerlessness I couldn't quite decipher. She had never imagined that her introverted son, who she cared for the most, would so easily side with me. She thought blood was merely a biological connection, but she underestimated a child's natural longing for a father. Fine. After a long silence, Victoria squeezed out a single word through gritted teeth. She picked up her phone and called her assistant. "Bring the contract, revise it," as he said. She hung up, then stood and walked upstairs without a glance at me. The sound of her heels on the stairs echoed, like ice cracking. I let out a breath, realizing my back was soaked. Arguing with this woman was more exhausting than facing an entire mercenary squad. I looked down. Alex was still clutching my shirt. "Thanks, kid." I ruffled his hair. He didn't speak, but the corners of his lips quirked upward slightly, a faint smile. That smile, like a ray of sunlight, instantly illuminated the cold house. On my first day at the Bluffs at Stonehaven, I immediately felt the class divide. Mrs. Davison had assigned me a guest room that was 100 times more luxurious than my $800 studio, but it was in the most secluded corner of the villa's first floor, right next to the storage room. The other household staff looked at me with a mix of disdain and curiosity. They were probably all wondering how this country bumpkin in a delivery uniform had managed to get in. I didn't care. For me, a bed was a bed. Besides, this one was a lot more comfortable than my old Har mattress. At dinner, the long dining table was laden with exquisite dishes, looking like something from a five-star restaurant. Victoria sat at the head of the table, cutting her steak expressionlessly. Alex sat beside her, his small face taut, his children's plate almost untouched. My seat was at the far end of the table, furthest from them. A young maid brought me a plate of the same steak, setting it down with an unnecessarily loud clatter, clearly on purpose. I picked up my knife and fork and slowly began to cut my steak. My movements were precise, textbook perfect. It was a skill I'd been forced to learn by a protocol instructor when I was undercover at high society galas during a mission in Europe. The young maid, who had tried to embarrass me, flashed a flicker of surprise in her eyes. Victoria noticed too. She paused her own cutting for a second, but quickly resumed. The meal proceeded in silence. Alex barely ate, just poking idly at the broccoli on his plate with his fork. "Not hungry?" I asked him. He nodded. "Victoria Froneth. Alex, finish your dinner. Chef Ramsay is a Michelin-starred chef. You shouldn't be picky." Alex pursed his lips, saying nothing, but his expression was clearly resistant. "I've got this," I said, putting down my knife and fork and standing up. "Kids have sensitive stomachs. This is too rich for him. I'll make him something simple." My words stunned everyone. Mrs. Davison was the first to object. "Mr. Miller, the kitchen is a restricted area, not somewhere you should be. And Chef Ramsay's culinary skill. Michelin-starred doesn't mean he knows what a kid wants to eat," I interrupted, walking straight into the kitchen. Chef Ramsay was a portly man in his 40s, dressed in a spotless white chef's jacket and a tall toque, an arrogant look on his face. He'd clearly heard the conversation outside, and he scrutinized me as I entered. "What do you intend to do?" "Borrow your kitchen for a moment. Make a grilled cheese sandwich," I said directly. A grilled cheese sandwich. Chef Ramsay looked like he'd heard the funniest joke ever. "My kitchen doesn't do simple meals." I knew what he meant. He was too high-end for something so basic. "Doesn't matter. I'll just use what's available." I walked to the stove, quickly checking the butter, bread, and cheese. Everything was perfect. I wasted no more words. I fired up the stove, buttered the bread, and began to assemble the sandwich. I melted the butter, laid down the bread, added the cheese, and then the other slice of bread. I pressed down, flipping it once the first side was golden brown. My hands moved with an almost practiced fluidity. This kind of quick, efficient cooking was something I learned while undercover in various situations. To avoid blowing my cover, I nearly become a gourmet chef at times, but also master the art of making simple, delicious, and nutritious meals from basic ingredients. The sneer slowly vanished from Chef Ramsay's face, replaced by shock. He could tell this was absolute top-tier basic culinary skill. Soon, a perfectly golden brown grilled cheese sandwich was ready. The aroma instantly filled the kitchen. I carried the sandwich out and placed it in front of Alex. "Try it." The little guy's eyes had already lit up. He picked up the sandwich, took a huge bite, and his eyes widened. Then he started devouring it, his cheeks stuffed full like a little hamster. Victoria watched her son wolf down his food, completely dumbfounded. She had hired the best nutritionists and chefs for him, tried every dish imaginable, but he had never eaten with such gusto before. She didn't know that my seemingly simple grilled cheese sandwich had been made with precise calculations of butter and cheese, perfectly meeting a 5-year-old's healthy standards. And the way I prepared it not only made the bread crispier, but also maximized the flavors. These were all techniques I developed during wilderness survival, making the most nutritious and energy-rich food from the simplest ingredients. The sandwich quickly disappeared. Alex even scraped the plate clean with his small fingers. He let out a satisfied burp, rubbed his little belly, then looked up at me, his eyes showing a spark of dependence for the first time. "Dad, I want this again tomorrow." That dad was natural and loud. The atmosphere at the dining table became subtle. Mrs. Davison and the maids looked like they'd swallowed flies. Victoria looked at the empty plate, then at me, her eyes complex. She wiped her mouth with a napkin and stood up. "Starting tomorrow, Alex's meals will be your responsibility." Then, just like yesterday, she turned and went upstairs. I watched her retreating back, a faint smile playing on my lips. Conquering an Ice Queen CEO, perhaps it didn't require billions in assets or earth-shattering feats. Sometimes a simple grilled cheese sandwich was enough. At least it could start with conquering her. Well, her son's stomach. The next morning, as promised, I made Alex a hearty yet simple breakfast. Creamy oatmeal and 2 perfectly sunny-side-up eggs, a little crispy around the edges. He ate with complete satisfaction. When Victoria came downstairs, she saw this warm scene. Morning light streamed in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and her son and I were side by side, a harmonious atmosphere. She paused, seeming unaccustomed to such domesticity in her house. "I'm taking him to preschool today," I said. Victoria, who had been about to pick up her car keys, stopped. "The driver will take him." "Is the driver his dad?" I countered. Victoria didn't respond, a silent admission. I drove the Maserati, with Alex in tow, to the Sterling Academy, Harmony Creek's most exclusive private preschool. All the way there, Alex had his tablet out, his fingers constantly tapping. I glanced at him in the rearview mirror and asked, "What are you playing?" "I'm writing a small defense program to prevent Mom from monitoring me with cameras whenever she wants," he replied. Without looking up, I nearly slammed on the brakes. This kid was definitely a prodigy. At the preschool entrance, luxury cars were everywhere. Even the Maserati was just average here. Parents were impeccably dressed, adorned with jewelry. My casual clothes made me stick out. After dropping Alex off at the classroom door, I was about to leave when I saw something I didn't want to. A plump, boisterous little kid snatched Alex's tablet. "What's this?" "Let me play." Alex frowned, reaching for it. "Give it back." "No, I won't." The chubby kid, taking advantage of being half a head taller than Alex, held the tablet high. Alex couldn't reach it, his face turning red. "You walked over." "Hey kid, give the tablet back to your friend," I said, my tone calm. The chubby kid glanced at me. Instead of returning it, he swung the tablet back and forth in front of Alex, a provocative smirk on his face. Before I could make another move, a stout man in a Hawaiian shirt and a thick gold chain walked over, putting an arm around the chubby kid. "Good job, son. Take whatever you want. Nobody messes with you at school." The fat man said smugly, then squinted at me. "What's the problem? You got an issue? You know who I am." I looked at him, saying nothing. Alex tugged my shirt sleeve and whispered, "Dad, that's Mark Johnson. He's in real estate, one of Mom's competitors." So that was it. "I don't care who you are. Make your son return the tablet and apologize." My voice dropped, becoming cold. "Apologize?" Mark Johnson laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke. "Who the hell are you to tell my son to apologize? Let me tell you, if my son likes something, it's his. If you know what's good for you, you'll scram." He reached out his meaty hand, intending to shove my shoulder. The preschool teacher started to approach, wanting to intervene, but seeing Mark Johnson's aggressive demeanor, She hesitated, afraid to step forward. Just as Mark Johnson's hand was about to touch me, I shifted slightly, subtly extending my foot to trip him. Mark Johnson's shove met empty air, and with my trip, his large frame lost balance. He fell with a loud thud, landing face first in an utterly undignified sprawl. The surrounding parents let out a gasp. Mark Johnson's son looked stunned, his hand loosening, and the tablet dropped to the ground. I bent down, picked up the tablet, and checked it. Thankfully, it wasn't broken. I handed it back to Alex. Mark Johnson scrambled to his feet, his jowly face twisted with rage. "You dirty son of... You tripped me," he roared, swinging a fist at my face. I stood my ground, arms crossed, unmoving. Just as his fist was about to connect with my face, I simply raised my hand and, with 2 fingers, casually clamped down on his wrist. Mark Johnson's fist instantly froze in midair, unable to move another inch. He strained with all his might, his face turning red, but his wrist was like it was caught in an iron vise, unmoving. "You..." Mark Johnson's eyes were filled with fear and disbelief. I said, "Apologize." My voice was low, but filled with undeniable force. "Dad, Daddy." The chubby kid beside him started crying. Mark Johnson looked into my emotionless eyes and finally felt fear. He was a bully, only brave when facing weaker opponents, and he knew he'd met his match today. Sorry," he gritted out. "Not to me." I indicated Alex. Mark Johnson's face went from red to white, but eventually he reluctantly told his son, "Quick, apologize to that boy." The chubby kid tearfully mumbled an apology to Alex. I released his wrist. Mark Johnson, as if granted a pardon, grabbed his son and scurried away. I crouched down, patting Alex's shoulder. "If anyone ever bullies you again, don't be afraid. Hit them back directly. If you can't win, run and tell me. If the sky falls, Dad will hold it up for you." Alex looked at me, nodding emphatically, his eyes sparkling with admiration. Just then, in the preschool office, Victoria was watching everything unfold on the security monitor. She'd received a call from a teacher saying Alex had gotten into a conflict with another student and the other parent was being aggressive, so she'd rushed over. She expected to see me getting bullied or making a mess of things. However, everything happening on the monitor was completely beyond her expectation. My seemingly effortless yet incredibly precise movements, that calm composure in the face of danger, like a mountain unmoving even if the world crumbled, that was definitely not something an ordinary delivery driver possessed. Who exactly was he? Victoria watched the monitor as I gently ruffled her son's hair, then led him to a nearby convenience store to buy ice cream. For the first time, her face showed an expression called confusion. She thought she had hired merely the biological father of her child, a decent physical shield. Now, it seemed she had stumbled upon an extraordinary treasure. The incident at the preschool was like a pebble dropped into a calm lake. Though small, it sparked a deep interest and suspicion in Victoria regarding me. Over the next few days, I could distinctly feel an increase in the number of eyes watching me around the villa. It wasn't just Mrs. Davison and her ilk. There were also professional bodyguards lurking in the shadows. I didn't mind. My life was simple. I cooked for Alex every day, took him to and from school, watched cartoons with him in the evenings, or watched him code. Yes, the kid had already started self-learning Python, and at an alarming pace. This peaceful and warm life was what I had craved since my retirement. However, I knew this calm was only temporary. Victoria had pulled me into her world, and trouble would eventually come knocking. Friday night, Victoria had an important gala. For the first time, she didn't have the driver prepare the car. Instead, she said to me, "You're coming with me." "In what capacity?" I asked. "Driver and bodyguard." She replied quickly, seemingly not wanting to give me a chance to argue. I smiled, saying nothing. I changed into a black suit Victoria had arranged for me. It fit perfectly, but I disliked the restrictive feeling. "Dad, you look so handsome," Alex exclaimed, his eyes shining when he saw me. I pinched his cheek. "Be a good boy at home. Wait for me to come back." Victoria came downstairs, wearing a black evening gown that revealed her elegant neck and collarbone. Her long hair, usually styled up, was down, softening her sharp features and adding a touch of feminine charm. She paused when she saw me, too. She probably hadn't expected the difference in my demeanor when I wasn't in my delivery uniform. "Let's go," she said, breaking the silence, her voice still cool. The gala was at a five-star hotel downtown. The ballroom was packed with influential business people, an air of glamour and wealth everywhere. Victoria moved through the crowd like a queen, handling every interaction with ease. I stayed in a corner of the ballroom, like a real driver, idly nibbling on appetizers. At one point, a man who looked to be Victoria's age, but with sinister eyes, approached her with a drink. From their conversation, I gathered he was Victoria's uncle, Richard Chun, the second largest shareholder of Chun Industries. His words were full of concern for Victoria, but the ambition hidden beneath his feigned sincerity was unmistakable. The gala lasted until nearly 10 o'clock. Victoria had a few drinks, her cheeks flushed. I helped her walk to the underground parking garage. The garage was quiet, dimly lit, only the sound of our footsteps echoing. Just as we were about to reach the car, I suddenly stopped. "What's wrong?" Victoria asked, puzzled. "Rats," I said plainly. No sooner had I spoken than 7 or 8 dark figures emerged simultaneously from behind several pillars in the parking garage. Each held a gleaming machete, and they began to surround us. These men moved with steady steps and fierce eyes. They were clearly ruthless veterans who had seen blood. Victoria's face instantly paled, and her body began to tremble. Though decisive in the business world, she was still a woman and had never encountered such a scene. "Don't be afraid," I said, shielding her behind me, my voice low but exceptionally steady. "Close your eyes if you don't want nightmares." Victoria instinctively clutched my arm, her nails almost digging into my flesh. She didn't close her eyes. Instead, she stared wide-eyed at the approaching thugs. The leader, a man with a scar across his face, sneered, "Ms. Chun, our boss said he just wants to invite you for a little chat. Come with us." "What if I say no?" My voice was calm. "Then don't blame us for being rough." Scarface roared, swinging his machete at me first. The blade whistled through the air, aiming straight for my face. Victoria let out a muffled gasp. My body flashed to the left at an impossible angle, just barely dodging the blade. At the same time, my right hand shot out like lightning, seizing Scarface's wrist, twisting it down, then pulling him forward. Crack! A sharp snap of bone echoed. Scarface let out a piercing scream, his machete flying from his hand. I didn't stop. My left elbow drove forward, hitting him squarely on the chin. Scarface didn't even make a sound. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped limply to the ground. The entire sequence was fluid, lightning fast. The remaining men stared, stunned. They hadn't expected this seemingly mild-mannered driver to be such a tough opponent. "Everybody get him!" The men recovered and attacked me simultaneously from different directions. I shoved Victoria behind the car, then lunged forward like a tiger charging into a flock of sheep. I used no fancy moves, only the most direct and effective killing techniques. Side kicks, knee strikes, elbow jabs, chokeholds. Every strike brought someone down. My movements were so fast, they were just a blur. The only sounds in the air were snapping bones and muffled screams. Less than 30 seconds. The fight was over. 7 or 8 burly men lay on the ground, groaning in pain, none able to stand. The entire parking garage was deathly silent. I clapped my hands, as if I'd just completed a trivial chore. My suit didn't even have a wrinkle. I walked to Victoria, who was still in a daze, opened the car door, and gestured for her to enter. "Ms. Chun, we can go home now." Victoria's lips moved, but no words came out. She looked at the gruesome scene on the ground, then at me, her eyes filled with an unprecedented shock and terror. She thought I was just good at fighting. But what she had just witnessed, that wasn't just good at fighting. It was annihilation, a massacre. That precise targeting of human joints and weak points, that cold indifference to life, sent a chill down her spine. How many people had this man killed? I ignored her shock, started the car, and the Maserati smoothly exited the garage. Inside the car, dead silence. Only Victoria's rapid breathing reminded me that everything that had just happened wasn't a dream. Back at the villa, Victoria said nothing, went straight upstairs, and locked herself in her room. I could tell she was badly shaken. I shrugged indifferently, and went to the kitchen to make myself some noodles. After eating, I checked on Alex, who was sound asleep, tucked him in, and then returned to my secluded guest room. Just as I lay down, Stinger's encrypted call came through. "Boss, I found it. Spill it. Victoria Chin's uncle, Richard Chun, has been in frequent contact with someone named Blackadder from Harmony Creek's underworld. The guys who attacked you tonight were Blackadder's men. Richard Chun is quite ambitious. He's been trying to unseat Victoria from her CEO position. What about that night at the Grand Paramount? Did you find anything? That was the main thing I wanted to know." "Found it. That night, Richard Chun drugged Victoria's drink, intending to hand her over to a wealthy client with particular tastes to secure a project collaboration and simultaneously ruin Victoria's reputation. However, a hotel attendant delivered the wrong key card, accidentally sending her to your room. And that client in room 8806 waited all night but got nothing." Stinger paused, then continued. "Boss, that means you not only saved her, but also saved her honor, though in a rather unconventional way." My heart sank. So that's what happened. I'd always assumed that night was just her drunken indulgence. I never expected such a sordid scheme behind it. This woman, seemingly so strong, actually lived a tough life. "Also, boss," Stinger's voice turned serious, "I checked your records, and someone with very high clearance has been investigating your past." "It's Victoria," I immediately guessed. "Probably, but don't worry, your S-Class file is top secret. No one can see it except the highest commander of the Spectre unit. What she'll find is just a blank slate, or some fabricated ordinary resume we put together." "Got it. Keep an eye on Richard Chun. Report any unusual activity immediately." "Understood." I hung up, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep for a long time. The next day, when Victoria came downstairs for breakfast, her face was still pale. She had faint shadows under her eyes, clearly not having slept well. When she saw me, her gaze darted away, avoiding eye contact. "Thank you for last night," she said softly, her voice no longer icy, but laced with a complex emotion. "It was for Alex," I replied blandly. After breakfast, she stopped me. "We need to talk." We sat on the living room sofa, a coffee table's distance between us. "Who exactly are you?" she asked directly, her eyes filled with scrutiny and wariness. "My name is Jack Miller. I'm a delivery driver, and now I'm your son's father," I replied, giving nothing away. "Don't play dumb with me." Victoria's voice rose slightly. "An ordinary delivery driver can take down 8 armed thugs in 30 seconds. An ordinary delivery driver has that kind of cold, killer stare. Maybe I practiced some combat sport for a few days to keep people from stealing my deliveries," I lied. Victoria clearly didn't believe me. "I checked your records," she said. "Your background from 5 years ago is completely blank. You just appeared out of nowhere. That's not normal. Everyone has a past they'd rather not discuss." "Is your past killing people?" She stared intently at me, seemingly trying to read something in my face. I fell silent. My past was indeed about killing, but I only killed those who deserved it. Terrorists, drug lords, international criminals. My hands were stained with blood, but I also protected the peace of countless people. I couldn't tell her any of that. My silence, in Victoria's eyes, was an admission. Her face grew even paler. "Stay away from Alex," she suddenly said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't let him be around. A killer. You think I would harm him?" My brow furrowed. "I don't know." She was getting agitated. "All I know is you're dangerous. I can't gamble with my son's life." As we faced off, Alex came downstairs, tablet in hand. He looked at me, then at the emotional Victoria, his small brow furrowing. He walked to Victoria and handed her the tablet. "Mom, look." Victoria took the tablet, puzzled. On the screen was a video playing. The footage was shaky, seemingly filmed with a phone. The location was yesterday's underground parking garage. The video recorded the entire incident from the moment the thugs appeared. But unlike the hotel surveillance, this video had sound. My voice clearly came through. "Don't be afraid. Close your eyes." Then, Victoria's muffled gasp and the thug screams. Finally, my calm words, "Ms. Chun, we can go home now." The video ended, and the screen went dark. "Dad was protecting us," Alex said, looking up at Victoria, every word clear and precise. "He's not a bad person." Victoria looked at her son's clear, resolute eyes, then at the tablet, her body trembling slightly. She had never imagined that the terrifying moment last night would be replayed by her son in this way. She was even more shocked that her son would so steadfastly stand by me. She had tried to analyze me with logic and reason, but she had overlooked the child's purest instinct. This video, where did you get it? Victoria's voice was hoarse. I hacked into the hotel security system, downloaded all the surveillance footage, then used a program to synthesize the sound, Alex replied calmly, as if describing something as simple as eating or drinking. Victoria just stared, looking at her exceptionally intelligent son and the unfathomable man before her. She felt, for the first time, that events had completely slipped out of her control. Victoria ultimately didn't press further about my past. The underground garage video, coupled with Alex's "he's not a bad person," temporarily quelled her fear and suspicion. But our relationship entered a delicate balance. She no longer treated me as a simple driver or bodyguard, but she also didn't consider me a trusted family member. Her gaze held a mix of inquiry and wariness. I was content with the peace. As long as she didn't bother me and let me be a quiet stay-at-home dad, I was satisfied. That afternoon, I picked Alex up from preschool. As soon as we entered the villa, I saw a stranger sitting in the living room. The man was in his early 30s, tall and athletic, dressed in a crisp military green uniform. Though without insignia, the soldierly aura emanating from him was unmistakable. He saw me, his eyes lit up, and he immediately stood at attention. "Boss!" He instinctively started a salute, but halfway through, he remembered something and awkwardly lowered his hand. My brow furrowed. It was Stinger. For him to come here directly, without using our encrypted line, meant something serious had happened. "What are you doing here?" My voice was cold. "Boss, I'm in Harmony Creek for work. Thought I'd drop by and see you." Stinger scratched his head, smiling awkwardly. I ignored him and looked at Victoria, who was sitting at the head of the sofa. Victoria was holding a coffee cup, subtly sizing up Stinger, then glancing at me, her eyes full of confusion. "And this is?" she asked me. "An old friend," I vaguely replied. "A friend?" Victoria raised an eyebrow. She could see that this man, Stinger, looked at me with a mix of reverence and admiration. It was the look of a subordinate towards a superior, even a devotee towards a deity. How could an ordinary delivery driver have such an extraordinary friend? "Mr. Miller, aren't you going to introduce us?" Victoria put down her coffee cup, her tone allowing no refusal. "His name is Steve Rogers. He runs a small business." I casually made up a name and identity. "Mr. Rogers." Victoria turned to Stinger. "You look like you were in the military." "Yes, for a few years," Stinger replied smoothly, but sweat was already beading on his back. In front of a woman with Victoria's intimidating presence, he felt more nervous than facing enemy gunfire. "Oh, which unit?" "Victoria Prest." "That falls under classified regulations, ma'am. Can't discuss it." Stinger wiped his forehead. Just then, Alex spoke. "Uncle, you smell a lot like my dad." Stinger froze. "What kind of smell?" "Gunpowder, oil, and a faint hint of blood," Alex said calmly. "Only, Dad's smell is very faint, almost gone. Yours is very strong." The air in the living room solidified. Stinger stared at the little boy, his jaw nearly hitting the floor. Victoria's hand, holding the coffee cup, tightened abruptly, her knuckles turning white from the pressure. "Gunpowder? Blood?" These words, coming from a 5-year-old, sounded so eerie, yet so real. She looked sharply at me. My expression darkened. I pulled Stinger up. "We'll talk outside." I led him to the villa's garden, making sure no one was around. "What's going on? Who sent you here?" I demanded in a low voice. "Boss, big trouble." Stinger's expression turned grim. "The butcher is in Harmony Creek." My pupils constricted. The butcher, one of the world's top assassins, known for his ruthlessness and cruel methods. Also, an old adversary of our Spectre Special Operations Unit. 3 years ago, we clashed in a remote South American country. I personally broke 3 of his ribs, failed his mission, and sent him scrambling. He hated me to the bone. What's he doing here? Intelligence we intercepted indicates someone paid a sky-high price to hire him to kill in Harmony Creek. The target is Victoria Chun, Stinger said. My heart instantly sank to rock bottom. Richard Chun, that old fox, after his failure in the underground garage, had actually hired an international assassin. He was truly backed into a corner. Is the intelligence reliable? Absolutely. The butcher's M.O. is to conduct a week of observation, mapping the target's routines and security before making his move. We estimate he's been in Harmony Creek for 3 or 4 days already, which meant that for the past few days, Victoria, Alex, and I had been under the watchful eye of a top assassin. A chill ran down my spine. Boss, HQ has sent people, but they need time to deploy. For these next few days, Victoria's safety. It's all on you. Stinger looked at me. Why don't you rejoin the unit? If you're back, one butcher is nothing. I shook my head. I'm not going back. I looked at the second-floor window of the villa, where Alex's small figure was peeking out at us. I promised myself, and I promised him, to live a normal life. But I cut him off. The butcher, I'll handle him. Your people, don't interfere. Just be on standby outside. I don't want to drag them, mother and son, into this. Boss alone. It's too dangerous. Have you forgotten who I am? I turned and looked at him. Stinger looked into my eyes and instantly fell silent. He had forgotten. This man, standing before him, was the former captain of the Spectre Special Operations Unit, codenamed Ghost. A man ranked as the #1 S-class threat by the Western Dark World. Someone not to be provoked. If he wanted to, he alone was an army. I didn't pay any more attention to Stinger and walked back into the villa. In the living room, Victoria was still sitting there, her face grim. She looked at me, her eyes filled with struggle and contradiction. Stinger's appearance, Alex's words, were like a key, unlocking the Pandora's box of doubt in her heart. She knew I was no ordinary man, and an extraordinary man, suddenly appearing in her and her son's lives. Was he a protector or the beginning of another abyss? She didn't know. This feeling of losing control filled her with immense frustration and fear. Stinger's visit was like a thorn in Victoria's side. She didn't press for more answers, but her surveillance of me subtly escalated. I could feel several unfamiliar gardeners and electricians around the villa. These were all people she'd hired from top-tier security firms. Unfortunately, in my eyes, these people were virtually transparent. I couldn't be bothered to point it out. All my energy was now focused on the butcher hiding in the shadows. A top assassin's lurking presence was like the sword of Damocles hanging over our heads, ready to fall at any moment. I had to expose him before he made his move. For the next few days, I was practically inseparable from Victoria and Alex. When taking Alex to school, I'd check her out beforehand. When Victoria went to work, I'd stay in a coffee shop downstairs, my senses already covering the entire building. My mental state was hyper-alert, my 5 senses amplified to the extreme. Any unusual scent in the air, any discordant movement in my field of vision, escaped my notice. This feeling was both familiar and sickening. It was the state of Ghost, not Jack Miller. Wednesday evening, Richard Chun, under the guise of a group board meeting, hosted a charity gala. Victoria, as CEO, had to attend. It's a setup, Victoria told me as she changed. Her tone was calm, as if she had already prepared herself mentally. I know, I replied, helping her adjust the hem of her gown. Then why let me go? Because only if you go will the rats come out of their holes. I looked up at her reflection in the mirror. Don't worry, you have me. My words seemed to give her some strength. She looked at me in the mirror. Her eyes flickered, and she said nothing more. The gala was held again at the Grand Paramount Hotel. The same familiar ballroom, the same hypocritical faces. Richard Chun seemed particularly smug today, weaving through the crowd with a champagne flute, occasionally casting provocative glances our way. He seemed convinced that after tonight, Chun Industries would be his. Like last time, I played the role of a diligent bodyguard, standing a half step behind Victoria, my eyes seemingly casually scanning the room. I was looking for someone, looking for the butcher. A top assassin excels at disguise. He could be anyone, a waiter, a guest, even a hotel cleaning staff. My gaze swept across every face. Their height, gait, eyes, how they held their glasses, everything was rapidly analyzed in my mind. Suddenly, my gaze locked onto a waiter pouring drinks for guests. He looked ordinary, around 30, average build, with a professional smile. But when he poured, His left pinky finger habitually curled slightly. This was a subtle movement, but I caught it. I remembered clearly. 3 years ago in South America, after the butcher's ribs were broken by me, he used his left hand to support himself while escaping, and his pinky was unnaturally curled just like that. It was a lingering effect from an old gunshot wound. It was him. I sneered inwardly. Found you at last. I saw the butcher walking unhurriedly towards Victoria, carrying a tray with several glasses of sparkling wine. One of the glasses had bubbles rising at a slightly slower rate than the others. There was something in it, some kind of colorless, odorless, fast-acting poison, or something else. I didn't know, and I didn't need to know. Just as the butcher was 3 steps away from Victoria, a very drunk fat man suddenly laughed loudly and bumped into a female guest nearby. The woman shrieked, her drink flying from her hand. The red liquid arced gracefully through the air, splashing entirely onto Richard Chen's expensive white suit. The ballroom instantly erupted into chaos. Everyone's attention was drawn to Richard Chen. The fat man who caused the collision, meanwhile, took advantage of the confusion to turn and walk away, quickly disappearing into the crowd. That fat man was me. I had simply used a minor hypnotic trick to subtly influence the female guest's nerves, making her perform a specific action at a specific time. These little tricks were standard procedure for me during interrogations. And the real me, at the exact moment of creating the diversion, had already moved beside the butcher. In the thousandth of a second, he was distracted by the sudden commotion. I, with a speed imperceptible to the naked eye, swapped the problematic sparkling wine on his tray with another, normal glass. Then, like a true bodyguard, I shielded a startled Victoria, whispering, "Ms. Chen, it's not safe here. We should leave. Victoria Nadif." As we turned to leave, I saw the butcher had already reached Richard Chen and handed him the problematic glass of sparkling wine. "Mr. Chen, to calm your nerves." Richard Chen took the glass, glanced at his own disheveled state, then at the unharmed Victoria. His face turned livid with anger, and without thinking, he downed the sparkling wine. I escorted Victoria out of the ballroom. Behind us, a much louder commotion erupted, followed by Richard Chen's horrified screams. My face itches. I didn't look back. I knew the butcher hadn't put a fatal poison in that drink, but rather a biochemical agent that would cause skin to rapidly fester in a short time. Richard Chen was finished, and the butcher, his mission, had also failed. A top assassin, his mission failed, his location exposed. What awaited him was the wrath of his employer and the pursuit of his peers. My strategy of killing with a borrowed knife was far more brutal than killing him myself. Stepping out of the hotel, the evening breeze felt cool on my face. "It's over?" Victoria asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "Yeah, it's over," I nodded. She looked at me, her eyes incredibly complex. She had witnessed everything that happened tonight. My phantom-like movements, the perfectly timed planning, the ruthless use of others. This man was like an omnipotent devil. He had effortlessly manipulated both Richard Chen and the so-called international assassin. Who are you?" she asked again. This time, I didn't evade the question. I looked at her and said, word for word, "Someone who can protect you and your son." Richard Chen, publicly disfigured at the gala, was quickly investigated and found to be colluding with an international assassin, attempting to harm his own niece. With irrefutable evidence, he was thoroughly removed by the board of directors and handed over to the police. The internal strife of Chen Industries ended in a dramatic fashion. The crisis was over, but the atmosphere between Victoria and me became even stranger. She no longer spoke to me with cold words, but she still maintained a distance. She would quietly watch me play with Alex, her eyes filled with contradiction. She relied on the sense of security I brought, yet she was also terrified of my unfathomable past. I knew that if this knot wasn't untied, there would always be a wall between us. And the key to untying that knot wasn't in my hands, but in hers. She needed an answer to who Jack Miller really was. So, she used all her connections and resources, embarking on a new round of investigations. This time, her target wasn't the National Household Registration System, but the global underground intelligence network. She contacted a legendary information broker, codenamed the Oracle. It was said that if you could pay the price, he could get you any information you desired. Victoria's offer was 10% of Chun Industries' overseas subsidiaries' annual profit. This was a price that would drive any small country wild. The Oracle took the job. 3 days later, an encrypted email arrived in Victoria's private inbox. The email contained only one attachment. The attachment was protected by a triple password. Victoria spent a full hour decrypting it. The moment the file opened, her breath hitched. The file was entirely in English, titled Ghost. Below, it was a heavily redacted dossier. Name, redacted nationality, redacted codename, Ghost affiliation, Spectre Special Operations Unit, former captain classification, S-Class, highest danger level, combat record. 2012, remote jungle territories, solo infiltration, neutralized 12 core members of the Khoen Sa drug cartel, extracted without incident. 2014, off the Horn of Africa, rescued the hijacked cargo ship Ocean Voyager and its 36 crew members from a pirate encirclement. 2017, North Africa, disarmed a dirty bomb capable of destroying a city. During the mission, eliminated 27 core members of the Shadow Syndicate terrorist organization. 2018, South America, foiled the Butcher's assassination plot, engaged in direct combat, severely injuring him. One after another, all were world-shattering S-Class missions. At the end of the dossier was a comprehensive evaluation of Ghost. Evaluation: Tactical Master, Combat Grandmaster, Disguise Expert. Proficient in major global languages, skilled in all types of firearms, explosives, and vehicles. Possesses extremely strong single combat capabilities and psychological fortitude. Personality: calm, decisive, dangerous. Ranked as the top S-Class target to be avoided by the Western Dark World. Status: 5 years ago, for unknown reasons, suddenly retired and vanished from all intelligence networks. Victoria's hands were trembling slightly. She turned page after page, every word like a heavy hammer striking her heart. She finally understood why Jack Miller could so easily take down 8 thugs, why he smelled of gunpowder and blood, why that soldier named Stinger held him in such reverence, why he could manipulate the international assassin, the Butcher, so effortlessly. It turned out that the delivery driver she had always looked down on, the poor kid she thought had gotten lucky, was actually a legendary figure standing at the pinnacle of the world. A man who, by himself, could rival a nation. A true ghost. Her mind was in chaos. Shock, reverence, fear, and a hint of pride she hadn't even noticed herself. She closed the laptop and walked to the living room. I was with Alex, building a complex castle out of blocks. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, falling on us, warm and peaceful. I noticed her gaze and looked up. "What's wrong?" Victoria looked at me, at my ordinary casual clothes, at my gentle smile, and found it impossible to connect the man before her with the cold ghost from the dossier. This extreme contrast made her feel dizzy. "Dad, look, I built a watchtower." Alex excitedly showed me his creation. "Not bad, but the structure here isn't stable. An enemy shell could collapse it. See, it should be like this." I picked up a block and helped him reinforce the structure. I was explaining basic architectural mechanics, but to Victoria, it sounded like specialized military jargon. She just stood there quietly, watching us, father and son, her eyes filled with extreme complexity. She thought she had taken in a stray cat, intending to keep it as a pet. Instead, she found it was a tiger willing to sheath its fangs and claws for her and her child. That night, after Alex was asleep, Victoria called me to her study. It was the first time she had actively invited me into her private domain. The study was large, one wall filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, another adorned with abstract modern art I didn't understand. The air was filled with a faint mix of coffee and ink. She didn't sit behind a large executive desk. Instead, she had us sit together on the sofa by the window. Only a small coffee table separated us. She poured me a glass of water, then turned her laptop towards me. On the screen was the dossier about Ghost. "Is this you?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I looked at the familiar text and redacted areas on the screen, silent for a moment. Yes, I didn't deny it anymore. When she could lay that dossier in front of me, any denial would be meaningless. Getting my affirmative answer Victoria's body still trembled uncontrollably. "Why?" she asked, her voice filled with confusion. "Why would you become a delivery driver? A legend at the peak of the world, a man countless heads of state would treat with deference. Why would he be content to be a low-level delivery driver in Harmony Creek?" This was what she couldn't understand. I picked up the glass of water and took a sip. The warm water flowing down my throat slightly warmed my heart, which had turned cold from the memories. "Because I was tired," I said softly, looking out at the night. "I killed too many people, and I saw too much death. My comrades, one by one, fell before me. After every mission, I would ask myself, what was the point of it all?" My voice was calm, as if I were telling someone else's story. 5 years ago, on my last mission, my second-in-command, my best brother, died shielding me from a bomb. Before he died, he told me, "Captain, live for me. Live like an ordinary person." So I retired. I destroyed all my records and came to Harmony Creek. I wanted to forget the past, forget Ghost, and just be an ordinary man named Jack Miller. I found a most mundane job, riding my scooter through the city every day, watching the everyday lives of people. I felt a deep sense of peace. Until, that night, I turned and looked at Victoria. Meeting you at the Grand Paramount was an accident. But that accident gave me a reason to stay, a reason to fully commit to this new life. I thought, after that night, we'd never cross paths again. I even thought I'd just live out my life quietly alone. Until that day you showed up with Alex. I looked at her, my eyes becoming incredibly serious. "Victoria, you might not believe it, but the moment I saw Alex, my heart, which had already died, suddenly came back to life. He is my reason for living, my only connection to this world. So, I'm willing to do anything for you. Not for your money, not for your status. Just because you are his mother." The study was silent, only the sound of our breathing. Victoria's eyes, without her realizing it, had turned red. She had always thought I stayed by her side for money or some other ulterior motive. She had never imagined the truth was this. This man, carrying such a heavy past, only wanted to be an ordinary person. And her son's appearance had pulled him back into the dangerous, blood-soaked world he had grown to despise. An indescribable wave of guilt and heartache instantly overwhelmed her. "I'm sorry." She lowered her head, her voice catching. "I didn't know." "You don't need to apologize." I shook my head. "Actually, I should thank you. Thank you for giving birth to him and for raising him so well." I looked at her, and for the first time, gave a genuine, gentle smile. "And also, that night, you weren't willing. Richard Chun drugged your drink." I told her the truth I'd heard from Stinger. Victoria's head snapped up, her eyes wide with shock and humiliation. "So, I'm not your bodyguard, nor am I a tool you hired with money." I looked into her eyes, stating each word. "From start to finish, I was protecting you, whether you knew it or not, whether you needed it or not." In that moment, the ice mountain that had been frozen in Victoria's heart for years completely crumbled. She could no longer control her emotions, and tears rolled down her cheeks like broken strings of pearls. She wasn't the high and mighty Ice Queen CEO. She was just an ordinary woman who had been wronged and needed protection. I didn't speak, just quietly handed her a tissue. That night, the invisible wall between us finally disappeared. Richard Chin's downfall didn't completely end things. A cornered beast would fight. Before the police took him away, that old fox activated his final, most desperate plan. He contacted a mercenary squad he had previously hired, the Vultures. This squad was a sworn enemy of the Butcher's assassin organization. They operated constantly in Africa and the Middle East, known for their savagery and unscrupulous methods. Richard Chin's terms were simple. He would pay $50 million, and the Vulture squad would infiltrate Harmony Creek, kidnap Alex at all costs, and then kill Victoria and me. He wanted to destroy our family and everything we held dear. On Friday afternoon, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Stinger's urgent call came in. "Boss, it's bad. The Vulture squad has crossed the border. 12 men, fully armed, and their target is the villa." My heart plummeted. "Where are they?" "According to thermal imaging, they've already infiltrated the bluffs at Stonehaven through the blind spots in the security system from the back hill, and they're approaching the villa. Estimated 10 minutes until arrival." I immediately rushed out of the kitchen. Victoria was in the living room, playing chess with Alex. Victoria, take Alex to the basement bunker immediately. Hurry. My tone was urgent and left no room for argument. Victoria saw my unprecedentedly serious expression and instantly knew something was wrong. She didn't ask any questions, scooped up Alex, and ran towards the basement. The villa's basement had an emergency bunker built by Victoria's father, with steel plating thick enough to withstand small bombs. Once they were inside, they would be absolutely safe. After confirming they were in the bunker and the door was locked, I breathed a small sigh of relief. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of the villa, looking out at the seemingly calm garden. My eyes turned cold. The Vulture Squad. I'd heard of them. A pack of inhuman mad dogs. Since you've delivered yourselves to my doorstep, don't blame me for making sure you never leave. I took off my apron and tossed it onto the sofa. Then, I went upstairs to my room. I dragged out a box from under my bed, a box I hadn't opened since I arrived in Harmony Creek. Opening it, inside lay a disassembled P2-26 pistol, several magazines, a sharp military dagger, and a few small flashbangs. These were the only things I took with me when I retired. I assembled the pistol with maximum speed, checked the ammunition, and strapped the dagger to my calf. After all this, I took a deep breath. The delivery driver, Jack Miller, was temporarily offline. Now, standing here, was Ghost, the captain of the Spectre unit. I turned off all the lights in the villa, and the entire house plunged into darkness. I merged into the shadows like a true ghost. Soon, a dozen dark figures, like specters, stealthily approached the villa from all directions of the garden. They moved in perfect coordination, providing covering fire for each other, clearly seasoned veterans. The team leader, codenamed Vulture, made a hand signal. Two team members immediately moved forward, preparing to breach the door lock. Just then, bang! A faint gunshot. A blood-red hole instantly appeared in the forehead of one of the team members. He didn't even make a sound, simply collapsing. In the silent night, that gunshot was remarkably abrupt. Ambush! Take cover! Vulture's face changed dramatically as he roared. All team members quickly dispersed, seeking concealment. They didn't understand. Intelligence indicated the target was just a retired Special Forces soldier and two unarmed civilians. How could there be such precise sniping? They didn't know I was only using a handgun. I was in a master bedroom on the second floor, using a gap in the curtains to deliver that fatal shot. Hawkeye, find a sniper's position. Vulture snarled into his comms. Can't find him. He fired once and moved. He's like a ghost. In the darkness, I moved like an elegant hunter, weaving through the villa's rooms. I didn't need night vision. The darkness was my best disguise. And these so-called elite mercenaries in my eyes were like fireflies in the night. So clear, so fragile. I fired again. Another team member, attempting to flank from the side, fell. FCK, he's playing with us. Vulture roared in fury. Everyone stormed the house. I refuse to believe one man can stop 10 of us. The remaining 10 team members began to suppress the second-floor windows with gunfire. Simultaneously, several men forcibly breached doors and windows from different entrances, rushing into the villa. They made a fatal mistake. In open terrain, they might have posed some threat to me. But in a confined indoor space in close quarters combat, they were facing a god. The first team member who rushed in, barely stepping into the living room, hadn't even adjusted to the indoor darkness when he felt a chill at his neck. He looked down and only saw a dagger being pulled out of his throat. The second team member followed closely. He only saw the dark silhouette of his comrade falling, and before he could react, a hand covered his mouth from behind. Then, he felt his neck being twisted 180 degrees with immense force. Crack! His world plunged into eternal darkness. I was like death itself, harvesting lives in the darkness. Every strike was clean and decisive, without a trace of hesitation. Less than 5 minutes. The 6 team members who stormed the villa were all silently neutralized by me. Outside, only Vulture and 3 other team members remained. Wildcat, Mongrel, respond, respond. Vulture desperately called into his comms, but there was only dead silence. An unprecedented fear engulfed him. He finally realized they hadn't provoked some retired Special Forces soldier. They had provoked a devil. Retreat. Retreat now, he screamed in terror. But it was too late. I leaped from the second-floor balcony, landing silently behind them. Looking for me? My voice, as if from the depths of hell, echoed in their ears. All four men turned simultaneously, their faces etched with terror. What greeted them were 4 crisp gunshots. The battle was over. I stood in the moonlight, blood that wasn't mine staining my clothes. On a distant hillside, Stinger and his team, through high-powered binoculars, witnessed everything. Everyone was silent. They knew their boss was strong, but they hadn't imagined he was this strong. One man, 1 pistol, 1 dagger, had wiped out a fully armed elite mercenary squad in less than 15 minutes. This wasn't human. This was a god. Notify the cleanup crew, I calmly instructed into my earpiece. Keep it quiet. Don't want to scare the neighbors. With that, I dropped the gun and turned to walk back into the villa. I needed a shower and a change of clothes, because soon I still had to tell my son a bedtime story. When I finished my shower and changed, stepping out of the bathroom, Victoria and Alex had already emerged from the bunker. The villa was once again brightly lit. However, a faint, lingering scent of blood, not entirely dispersed, still hung in the air. Victoria looked at me, her face pale, her lips still trembling slightly. She had clearly guessed what had just happened. Alex hid behind her, only his eyes peeking out, timidly looking at me. Although I had washed myself clean, the lingering aura of a recent massacre still made the child afraid. My heart felt a pang. This was the last thing I wanted to see. I didn't want them to see my ghost side. I slowly crouched down, trying to make my expression as gentle as possible. Alex, don't be scared. Dad's here. Alex looked at me, hesitated for a moment, then came out from behind Victoria and ran to hug me. Dad, are you hurt? He whispered, his voice shaky. No, I said, stroking his head and holding him tightly. Dad's fine. All the bad guys were chased away. The warm, small body in my arms brought back the warmth to my cold heart. Holding Alex, I stood up and looked at Victoria. It's all over, I said. Victoria looked at us, father and son, her eyes welling up again. She didn't ask about the details, nor did she ask what happened to those men. She simply walked over and took Alex from my arms. You should rest, she said. I'll make dinner. With that, she carried Alex towards the kitchen. I watched her retreating back, a little surprised. This Ice Queen CEO, who probably never boiled an egg in her life, was going to cook herself? Half an hour later, I stared at the 2 burnt, unrecognizable dishes on the dining table, deep in thought. Alex's face was crumpled, clearly at a loss for where to begin. Victoria's cheeks were flushed, a mix of embarrassment and awkwardness. Well, it's my first time cooking, so it might not be very successful. I picked up my chopsticks, took a bite, and put in my mouth. An indescribable taste exploded on my taste buds. Salty, bitter, with a hint of burnt. I swallowed it without changing my expression. It's good, I said. Tastes like home. Victoria froze. She looked at me, a flicker of emotion passing through her eyes. Alex, mimicking me, bravely picked up a tiny piece, closed his eyes, and put it in his mouth. Then his little face instantly turned green. I couldn't help but laugh. In the end, I made dinner again. After we ate, I told Alex a bedtime story like always and tucked him in. When I came out of his room, I saw Victoria waiting at the door. I prepared the guest room. You should move in, she said softly. I paused. She meant the large guest room next to the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, not the small room I'd been in next to the storage closet. No need. I'm fine where I am. No. She suddenly raised her voice slightly, her tone carrying an undeniable stubbornness. You're my son's father and man of this house. You can't stay in that kind of place anymore. I looked at her, and in her bright eyes, I saw a hint of nervousness and expectation. Okay, I nodded. I packed my few worn clothes and moved into the new room. The room was large and clean, with the villa's garden just outside the window. As soon as I put my bag down, Victoria walked in. She held a document in her hand. What's this? I asked. A contract. I frowned. Again, I took the contract and opened it. This time, the title wasn't Personal Bodyguard Agreement, but Prenuptial Agreement. The agreement was simple. Party A, Victoria Chun, voluntarily transferred 50% of all her assets to Party B, Jack Miller. Regardless of whether the marriage continued in the future, this transfer was permanently valid. At the end of the agreement, another document was attached. It was a marriage registration application form, already filled out with the woman's information and signature. My hand trembled slightly. I looked up, staring at her in shock. Victoria, I'm not hiring a bodyguard. Victoria interrupted me, her cheeks flushed, but her eyes exceptionally firm. I'm proposing to my son's father. She took a deep breath, gathered her courage, and looked into my eyes. Jack Miller, I know I had many misunderstandings about you before, and I did many wrong things. I hurt you repeatedly with my arrogance and prejudice. But after everything that's happened, I see clearly. You're not some devil. You're our hero. Alex is and mine. I don't want you to carry so much alone anymore. I want to share your past with you, and I want to create our future with you. So, her voice took on a tremor of pleading. Will you give me a chance and give yourself and Alex a complete family? I looked at her, at this woman who had shed all her icy facade, revealing her most authentic, most vulnerable self to me. My heart was a mix of emotions. I never thought someone like me could have a home. I looked at the marriage application in her hand, then remembered Alex's small face, so much like mine. Slowly, a smile spread across my face. I took the pen from her hand and signed my name on the Party B line. Jack Miller. The pay is too high, I said, looking at her, a laugh in my voice. I think more than half your assets, what I really want, is you. Victoria's tears, once again, streamed down her face. But this time, they were tears of happiness. She threw herself into my arms, hugging me tightly. Outside the window, moonlight streamed like water, gently falling upon us. I knew that from today on, Ghost would forever sleep, and Jack Miller's life had just begun.